Hey, welcome, folks. Glad to have you with us. Glad to be with you. This is kind of a special day, and so we have a special guest. It is Roger Pilon. He is the founder and director of the Cato Institute's Center for Constitutional Studies. And we were talking about the Federalist Papers and the Constitution. And I want to jump right back in and toss it back to Roger. Roger, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, let's continue.
Yes, where we just before the break, you would ask me about the Federalist Papers and how they might serve to help courts in interpreting various, especially broad passages of the Constitution. I had mentioned Federalist 51, which gives you broad readings. Federalist 10, for example, is a discussion of federalism and how this would work, or how Madison thought it would work. Federalist 45 gives us the famous words that the Constitution establishes a government whose powers are few and defined. That was a passage that was often quoted during the Obamacare litigation by the courts below that found Obamacare to be unconstitutional. The idea that Congress's powers are not what they are today under the Constitution, but are few and defined. Now, three of the clauses that have been expanded vastly by the court since the New Deal are the General Welfare Clause, or the Taxing and Spending Clause, the Commerce Clause, and the Necessary and Proper Clause. Those are clauses 1, 3, and 18 in Article 1, Section 8, which sets forth the only 18 powers that Congress has. Now, you look at the Federalist Papers and you see in Federalist 41, 42, and 44, they address those powers expressly. It was James Madison, the principal author of the Constitution, who wrote those numbers in the Federalist Papers. In Federalist 41, Madison made it clear that the power of Congress to tax and spend for the general welfare of the United States was not a power to tax and spend for anything that might be read as serving the general welfare. Indeed, it's not a welfare provision at all. It is a provision that sets forth the general heading, general welfare. And then he went on to say, what this heading does is draw together in one term the particular powers that are listed under it. The power to create post offices and post roads, the power to create a law for intellectual property, the power to create a navy, and so on and so forth. Those are where the actual power rests, not with this so-called, not with any independent power to tax and spend for the general welfare. Yet that, of course, is what it has become today. With respect to the Commerce Clause, here too we have an example of a clause that was written, as I said in the previous segment, to ensure the free flow of goods and services among the states in light of the actions by states to block that free flow in the name of local interests. Well, the Commerce Clause, as Madison makes clear in Federalist 42, was just for that purpose. It was to ensure free, unimpeded trade among the states and to preclude states from blocking that trade in the interests of their local merchants and manufacturers.
Let me just interrupt for a second and ask a question. Does that mean that if I manufactured something in Virginia and I wanted to sell it in Maryland, that the state of Maryland could be told by the federal government, you can't put a special tax on the Virginia goods?
Exactly. You can't put, for example, a
tariff.
Tariff, yes, and to make the whatever you make in Virginia more expensive in Maryland, so that those who make the same thing in Maryland will have a commercial advantage of it. No, that's exactly what it means. And then the Necessary and Proper Clause gives Congress the means to carry into execution its various enumerated powers. It's not a power to do more things. It's a power to do just those things that are necessary and proper for carrying into execution the other 17 powers that Congress has. And so that is all addressed right there in the Federalist Papers.
When the Founding Fathers were trying to find ways to fund the federal government, and we'll go into this in greater detail, I think, in the next segment of the program or the one shortly thereafter, did they look at taxes on income and other various methods as a national sales tax? Did they look at those options?
No. In fact, the main source of income for the federal government was the tariff. And that was true right up into the early 20th century, when, of course, the 16th Amendment, the income tax, was enacted.
So they didn't reject it? They never even looked at it? The income tax, for instance?
No, no, there was an income tax during the Civil War, and there was an income tax that was found unconstitutional late in the 19th century, and it was just for a very brief period. But no, it took a constitutional amendment to get the income tax.
All right, but the Founding Fathers didn't reject it or entertain the possibility. They just went for the tariffs.
No, they enumerated in the very first of Congress's enumerated powers those kinds of taxes that were permitted, and there's a lot of confusion about precisely what those kinds of taxes are, because today the government depends so heavily on the income tax.
Well, we'll go into that in greater detail in another segment. Tell me about the Anti-Federalists. Who were they? Do we know them?
Oh, sure, because there was a book out of the Anti-Federalist Papers coming out from the University of Chicago, my alma mater. And again, they stood for the idea that this new government would be too powerful, and they were very jealous of the power being retained by the states, and they saw the potential in this new government of running roughshod over the states.
All right, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to pause and get people up to date with what's going on around town and around the world. Then we'll come back with Roger Pilon from the Cato Institute. We'll see if we can get him to tell us who some of those famous people were that were the anti-federalists, if you will. All that coming up and more on the Gary Nolan Show. It is the Zimmer Radio Network.